Welcome to part 2 of our 3-part Synergistic CX podcast episode here on the CX channel, where we're diving into the customer experience of the flower shop industry. So next we've got the customer journey of flower shops or florists. And this is where we explore the actual customer journey, the journey that a customer takes with the brand or the industry in this case, from deciding that they might need the product or service that industry is offering, all the way through to visiting the establishment, talking with the staff members, making the purchases, and beyond that with follow-up and eventually customer retention and loyalty. So as usual, every single customer journey can be mapped out into 5 general stages across the top: awareness, consideration, conversion, retention, and advocacy. And then in each of those little rectangles below those stages, you have the various steps involved that are the individual steps that the consumer takes when they're going in and navigating the journey of this particular brand. Below that, you'll also see the individual touch points. So all of the different parts of the business that they're interacting with, from the staff to the products themselves, flowers in this case, to the payment systems and websites and so on. So before we move on to our moment of truth, that's our next slide here, we're going to see what we've done here. We take the customer reviews that we've pulled online globally, and we map the sentiment of those against this map in a graphical format. So that way we can see exactly how this micro industry is performing. And we're going to move on to that and see the global customer sentiment towards this particular micro industry. But before we look at the results, does anybody have any predictions about stages of the customer journey where things might go really well or perhaps not so good? Stephen, have you got some thoughts on what you think you'll see?
I honestly don't know the next slide, but I'm going to hazard a guess and say it's in the closing of the sale or even a follow-up. So let's see how. Unravel the cards.
Okay. Wow, there's a lot of green on this particular micro industries customer journey map. So we can see here there's strong positive scores all over the place. So for those of you that haven't seen this before, the different line and dot portions are the actual averages of those online customer reviews and the sentiments around those particular stages and steps. And the size of the circles represent how frequently those particular stages, those touch points in those steps are mentioned in those reviews. So you can see people talk a whole lot about the 3rd and the 5th stages there. Sorry, the 3rd and 5th steps there. And actually, there's a lot of discussion about a good number of the aspects of the customer journey here. Is anybody surprised by what they're seeing?
So it is surprising to the effect that it is a very strong customer journey. But we actually did the same study 7 months ago, and we got the same results. So this is not a mistake. It is we're verifying the consistently strong customer journey that this micro industry has, and we see a nominal dip in payment. Is it payment and pricing, Eric?
Yeah, that's what that is. We've seen that on almost every micro industry that we've looked at so far.
Yeah.
Yes, but what we have seen with the other micro industries is indeed the post-purchase engagement is usually consistently in the red. So, Stephen, you did mention that was your expectation. So, although this is not the case here, we have seen that being consistently the case with the other micro industries. Yeah. So, are we missing something here? Can the businesses?
Yeah. The thing here is, and this is the issue of customer reviews versus something like mystery shopping. The thing that's this industry in particular, it tends to be an emotive. You're walking into a store that's full of flowers. It smells good. Those things do affect your subjective ranking. And customers do discount in their heads something that goes wrong. Because you walk out of a florist shop and you're like, I've been to a florist shop. So it does subjectively change, it changes your subjective view of what happened, and you discount as a consumer the things that went wrong. So in an industry like this, it's more important than ever to dig a little bit deeper, because you could look at that and say, oh, we're good. We've got to improve a little bit on our payment process, but we're good. But maybe you're not. So there are some real hidden traps here to be careful of. Be careful of the customers, their bias. And a classic example is humans are attracted to different types of humans. I walk into a store, I'm naturally attracted to a certain person. They will score higher than someone else. So there is so much bias going on. Now, on average, you look at these, you need a lot of data, you start to get a true picture, but the individual person is going to be biased by different factors. And something as simple as that person was attractive to me, therefore 5-star. So we have to dig deeper and go like, what's the context of my industry?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we will be getting to that as we discuss the different methodologies that we employ to capture and to create better understanding about the customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
It's interesting here too. Also, even though the averages are very, very high, there is a large amount of variance. So there's potentially a lot of inconsistency here. That's the gray blob behind the line. You'll see that it's pretty large throughout most of the customer journey. So if you happen to be one of those brands who's maybe not up there in the higher average, you might want to dig deeper and really have a look at what you're doing.
And Eric, just where it's the most consistent is where it's scoring lowest.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a message in that in itself. It's like, we're not so good at this, but we're consistently not so good at this.
Right.
So the shading there is telling as much of a story as the colors and the actual scale itself.
Yeah, I could see a florist shop actually wanted to know, okay, the average in our industry is really high. How do we measure up?
Yeah, and these are the layers that you need to unravel in these things. It's so dangerous to look at that and go like, we're good. You might not be.
That's great perspective. Okay, so now we'll move on to key takeaways here. And as we talked about and saw on the last slide, the overall performance is really strong. Pricing is definitely a key focus area. It's strong and talked about a lot. And there's a large amount of variance, so it'd be really good to refine the measurement methods. You want to have a look here. Again, this is a global study. So if you're a florist, your industry is great, but how are you? And you really want to get some more precise tools than just online reviews to dig in and try to find out what your actual customer experience is like. And overall, it's a great looking micro industry. There's a lot of positive sentiment, and nothing's really out of place. Everything's just kind of consistently decent or better across the board. A lot of it's fantastic. So now we'll take it one step deeper, and we'll talk about the marketing mix funnel matrix for flower shops. So the marketing mix funnel matrix lets us take the various 7 Ps that we saw earlier, the product, people, process, place, price, promotion, and physical evidence, from the marketing mix. And across the top, we've got those same stages that we saw in the customer journey map. So we can see kind of a cross-reference of where were the complaints with respect to the marketing mix. And in this case, the bulk of the complaints that people had were about the product in the conversion stage. So you can see that here. So that would give you a good area to focus on as far as your return on investment for improving your CX using a CX measurement program. So you could focus in on the product and the conversion and potentially see some areas where you could get some good improvement. Looks like the people consideration, the people side of things as well, probably with respect to reference of individuals named in specific reviews. It could be that. But this is always an interesting chart. So now I'll create a starter voice of the customer survey for this particular micro industry. Chris, would you like to talk about this?
Yes. So one of the additional methodologies that we can use after analyze the online results is a voice of customer survey based on those results. And it's a good way to use that information as a starter point for your voice of customer program. By harnessing insights from customer sentiments and feelings, we can create the main questions that will be relevant. So we always have a primary question followed by the main drivers that will be seen in the next slide later on, and a closing questions that is normally, for example, the Net Promoter Score. Every time the question that we ask the customer has evaluation that is negative or neutral, 1, 2, or 3, for example, we can have additional questions that will help the organization to deep dive in terms of additional information. Here we can see, for example, the slide that Eric was explaining before in terms, for example, the cross between product and conversion. Conversion is a key element in this industry because the flowers can go bad very quickly. So this is something that needs to be addressed promptly. If we see here the product and conversion, we have product range and quality. This is the weakest performance step that was identified in our study. And then we can suggest the question, how satisfied were you with the variety and quality of flowers, for example? In terms of people, what we have addressed in the customer journey stage was the consideration. And here, what again was the weakest performing step was the initial greeting from the florist staff. So once we enter the store, if we are greeted by the staff, and then we can have the question, how satisfied were you with the initial greeting of the florist staff, and so forth and so on. So based on the preliminary questions that we have designed here, instead of just guessing what questions would be relevant to this industry, the online reviews can actually recommend to you what are the topics that are being discussed by your customers, which ones are more relevant to your brand, which ones are the points that are having more positive remarks, which means that you should not be asking your customers about because you already know that most of them will have positive feedback, and rather what are the topics that you should be focusing on your voice of customer program. And here is an example. How satisfied are you with the brand? And then you have the primary questions, and depending on the score, you can have more questions that are the key driver questions and the detailed questions. And then on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend the brand to a friend or a colleague? This way you have a more structured survey with minimizing the number of questions that you ask your customer and having a questionnaire that was built not based on just what you might think would be interesting for your customer, but based on the evidence of the study that you have already conducted. And here, because we are talking about the online study, I would like to ask Steve, in terms of voice of customer surveys, if you have any recommendation for your clients in terms of improving response rates.
Improving response rates is
always a tricky question.
It's so difficult. What does not work? What does not work is a QR code on the counter. What does not work is putting something on a receipt. What does work is having the customer details. Florists have frequent customers. They have a client base. It's not just someone who drives past a florist store and says, oh, I'll stop and buy flowers. Like, we should all do that, but we don't do that. They have regulars. They have a database. Go into the database. And if you can identify when a customer has bought and send them the email. Now, you're going to get a small response rate, but you're going to get responses. I think the lazy way is to just put something on the counter. And what happens with florist stores especially, the counter is a busy area. There's ribbons, there are there's stuff everywhere. And one of the things we evaluate is the cleanliness of the counter. But they tend to be, the counter's very small, there's no real estate, there's no space. So to have a QR, I was going to say stupid QR code, but a QR code or something on a receipt does not work. I think if you want customer feedback, it forces you then to, in this conversion process, hey, look, we've got a loyalty program. You could be a one-store florist. Sign up, but like a coffee shop, but you made this connection. So I would go the less lazy route if you're really interested in getting this information.
Thank you.
That's the end of part 2 of our 3-part Synergistic CX podcast episode, where we're diving into the customer experience of the flower shop industry. Join us in part 3, where we will interview our guest expert, Stephen DiPietro, who will share his extensive insights with us.